Good morning, everybody. I'm Hare. I'm a Programme Manager at Joseph Rowntree Foundation, and I lead our programme of work, Dementia Without Walls. The title of my session is Time Bombs and Tsunamis. I hope that was sensationalist enough to get your attention. And what I'm going to do in this session is to highlight the impact of negative language and images, the impact on how people with dementia themselves are viewed and how they also feel about themselves. And it's a huge stroke of luck that my presentation follows Nancy, because I've just sat here listening to the fantastic positive words and phrases that you've been using to talk about your life, and that really sets my presentation in context. So thanks very much for that psyching thing there. I'm going to be discussing what we can all do, all of us, to challenge unhelpful language and images and move us on to a more positive and hopeful representation of dementia. I'm going to be drawing on the testimonies of many people who have dementia, including some colleagues of Nancy's in Scotland, and including people from the DEEP network. And some of you who were here yesterday, if you heard Rachel Litherland's session, she was talking about the DEEP network, which is a network of now over 40 influencing groups of people with dementia all across the UK, including obviously the Scottish Dementia Working Group. And I'm going to be explaining a new initiative that the network is launching. So there have been a number of recent pieces of work highlighting the issue and the ethics of language and images, and some of the other speakers will be talking more about that. Particularly influential pieces of work have been the ADI report on stigma in 2012, the work that EFID has done. EFID is the European Foundation's initiative on dementia, of which JRF is a part, and they did a paper a few years ago about framing and reframing dementia, which is really interesting. Our own JRF report that was written with the Scottish Dementia Working Group on perceptions of ageing with dementia, which talked a lot about language and imagery, and also Alzheimer Europe's own work on the ethical issues about portraying people with dementia. Next one, yes. So, let's start with a few examples. We talked about time bombs, so here's a few time bombs, all taken from recent websites or press articles in the last couple of years. Here's a few more. You'll recognise some of these, I'm sure. And quite often, it's actually not the journalist or the presenter of a programme who has necessarily come up with these words or phrases themselves. They're often quoting really important politicians, policymakers, or documents. So in a sense, one can't necessarily blame the journalists or the media people. Here's a few other horrors. Oh, that's another time bomb, sorry. Just popped in. Here's a few other horrors. We've got dementia as the enemy of humanity. How does that sound? Thank you, Nancy. She's going to do the sound effects. We've got a tsunami of dementia. How powerless does that make us all feel? It's just coming. It's going to overwhelm us. There's nothing we can do about it. We've got no control. Talking about the living death, that doesn't quite sound like Nancy's experience, though some people would describe dementia in that way, as you can see. And we've also got, on the left-hand side, the overwhelming burden. Again, carers and other people do talk about the burden on themselves, and I don't want to, in any way, to undermine the validity of that experience. But it's a word that, for people with dementia, can be very offensive and very disempowering, and suggests that they have nothing to offer themselves. So alongside that sort of language, it's often accompanied by these kind of images. I've chosen the ones that seem to recur again and again. The wrinkled hands holding the despairing face, the lack of eye contact, the jigsaw with the piece missing, the diagrams of the damaged brain, and the person fading away so that they're no longer a real person, a whole person. Even when we have positive images, and I'll show you a few in a minute, they can be, the negative language that goes with them can completely undermine them, or vice versa. So, for example, I think that picture of Terry Pratchett is great. He's holding up a board declaring that it's possible to live well with dementia, like what I do. That's fantastic. But look at the title that they put on the top. Celebrities sign up to help dementia patients and ease the burden on carers. Is that what it's about? Is that what he's really saying? The word patient, I know there's lots of different views about this, and I'm sure they'll come up in questions and answers, but the word patient, for me, is a very passive word, and it immediately slots the whole person into a medical model where all they are somebody who can or cannot receive treatment. And again, there's the phrase burden. So here I've just listed a few of the more common examples. I'll just give you a moment to read them. I won't read them all, but we've got the living death again, demented, the looming epidemic, the plague, an onslaught. And I guess that, of course, there's loads of people from different countries here, but I guess that those all translate similarly in your own languages. So that's what we've got. We've got a lot of negative or sensationalist words and phrases and images. But you might ask, well, actually, does it really matter? Are we being a little bit pernickety, a little bit fussy? As long as dementia gets good airtime and good media presence, does it matter? Am I just being really politically correct in making a fuss about these words? Is this really an issue that we should prioritise? Well, I would argue that language and images do matter. They matter a lot. And they matter because they affect all of us. They affect those of us who have dementia and those of us who don't have dementia or who don't have it yet. So let's have a look. What is the impact? And I've drawn all these points from the testimonies of people with dementia themselves. And the impacts are many and varied. First of all, the phrases and the images that I've shown you sensationalise the disease. Words like time bomb and tsunami and epidemic link dementia with the idea of destruction and devastation and lack of power, something that's overwhelming. And those words, I would argue, when they're used again and again, they bring fear of old age to all of us, and fear paralyses us. It stops us working to make things better. These phrases and this impact actually causes us to deny what's happening to us. So we often hear of people who fear that they may have dementia or the first symptoms, but they're reluctant to seek help because of the stigma. And that, of course, then delays the diagnosis. We've heard earlier on that it can take people 3 or 4 years to actually seek a diagnosis, and that inevitably affects poor outcomes for the people involved. Words like these promote social exclusion and isolation, and they lead people to feel hopeless and frustrated and to lack any self-esteem of themselves. When we use words like victim or demented, or even, I would argue, words like dementia patient, these words dehumanize the person. They stop us seeing the whole person. And that can lead to poor care, which is a really serious issue in all the countries we come from. I think if we all feel hopeless about the situation, this is also a barrier to further research. If a time bomb's going to go off, whatever we do, or the tsunami is going to overwhelm us, why would we bother to look into how we can make the lives of people with dementia better? And finally, all these words and all these images actually ignore the testimonies of people with dementia, people like Nancy and many others, who tell us that it is possible to continue life and indeed sometimes to live a good life. Here are a few of the testimonies. Here's one from Pat, who also comes from the Scottish group. And Pat says, people get to hear the word dementia and it's all lumped together and they think you're finished, but you're not finished at all. Here's another quote from a person from the user involvement group in Bradford at an event last year. When first having a diagnosis, my thoughts were to think of a person in the end stages of dementia, not knowing that it was an in-between stage. And I wonder if that's because all the images she had seen were of people hiding their heads in their hands, maybe at the very end stages of dementia, people with a bit of their jigsaw missing. And here's Agnes. Agnes is here at the event today. She's in the next room, so I thought I'd let her come in and be with us for a minute. And Agnes and many of the people that she works with particularly hate the word sufferer or suffering from dementia. And Agnes says, we, the people in this action group, don't want to be seen as suffering from dementia. This is a term we really don't like. We're getting on with it. We're living with it with laughter and love, and that makes a difference. We're being heard and our opinions valued. So those are some of the testimonies of people with dementia, and we can't discount those. It's really important that we hear them and take them seriously. But what can we do to change matters? A few weeks ago, 20 members of various groups from the Deep Network met together in Liverpool and spent a whole day discussing the impact of language and images on them. There was lots of discussion, lots of stories, lots of laughter and tears, lots of animated debate and some disagreement. But also there was some real consensus. And the consensus was mainly about what one member of the groups called curl up and die words. And I love that phrase. And at the end of the day, this event, all the people at the event agreed that there are some words that should never be used to describe dementia or people with dementia. And these are the words. And these are words that, in the testimonies of these people, make them physically flinch when they hear or read them. Words that send out a message that a life with dementia is not worth living. That people are helpless and have nothing to contribute. Words that are negatively attached to the person rather than the condition of dementia. And words that create stereotypes so that we don't look at every person as an individual. There they are: senile, demented, sufferer, burden, victim, plague, epidemic, enemy of humanity, living death. These are the curl up and die words. Following the event, very quickly, because it was just literally a few weeks ago, the Deep Network have written a new guide on language. I've left some copies at the front there so you can pick them up at the end, and it will also be put up on the website by the end of the day. Their website is dementiavoices.org.uk. So we're launching that today, and we hope very much that all of you will commit to following it and take it back to your different countries and really think about it. In the meantime, I've got some suggestions of 10 things that we can all do, each and every one of us, to try and improve the language and images situation. So we can think about the words and images that we choose. Even if we choose to use what I would call a very sensational or an emotive word, let's at least do it thoughtfully rather than thoughtlessly. We need to use language that is realistic, that doesn't deny all the difficulties that dementia causes, but are also positive and give hope. We can supply the right words and images to the media and encourage them to use them. I know that's not always easy. But when it doesn't happen, we can challenge sensational language and images. We can stand up and say, please don't use that word sufferer, please don't use that word victim. People with dementia really don't like it. We can get the message across that people are living with dementia and not dying from it. We can give accurate information so that people are more informed, raise awareness in the public, involve people with dementia in everything. We need to listen to people with dementia and create opportunities to hear their words, and support the development of user-led groups, like the Deep member groups, so that they go right across Europe and beyond. Very quickly, here are a few examples of what I think is much more positive and acceptable language. and a few examples of more empowering, I think, images which show people as people with their friends in social situations, trying to get on with life. Just got a couple more testimonies, because I think my argument is that if we can shift to using these kind of language and these kind of images, people with dementia themselves will feel much more empowered to make change. Here's James, who's also probably in the next room, certainly at this event today. And James says, as well as empowering ourselves by finding answers and roads out of despair, we should also empower the professional workers and explain to them that there is life after dementia. So finally, my last slide, what are the next steps? What can we all do now? Well, I would urge you to be more thoughtful about our choice of words. I'm probably preaching to the converted here, I do realise that, but it's about challenging others and educating others so that they understand the impact of the words that they're using or the images. I hope that you will all adopt the new guideline, Dementia Words Matter. And the DEEP group are planning to launch a new call to action through the Dementia Action Alliance in England, which will reach out to all the members of the Dementia Action Alliance. And they will be urging those members to do 3 C's, to commit to the guideline, to make change and review their own practices, and also to challenge others. We're really pleased that the week after the guide had been written, it was sent to a senior producer at the BBC who was in charge of the coverage in the UK last week about dementia. There was a lot of coverage through all the regional channels, and they have committed to taking that up, which is a huge opportunity to influence. Comet Relief is also a funder of DEEP alongside JRF, and as you might know, they have Red Nose Day next spring, and they will be using the guideline to inform all their media and editorial work. And I'd love to know what other ideas you have and what you can do all across Europe. I'd like to leave you with a little quote from Margaret Mead, which I always think is helpful in these situations and which will urge us on. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you.